Hello there, and welcome to the. I guess this will probably be the third or fourth episode of the show. I haven't quite decided yet.
I think this was the first.
Today we're going to be talking about artificial intelligence and robotics as viewed through the lens of the Terminator, 1984 classic movie starring Arnold Schwarzenegger and Linda Hamilton. And Michael Biehn. Yep. I've got a guest here with me today. His name's Will, longtime best buddies. You wanted to introduce yourself, tell the people a bit about yourself?
Yeah, I feel like sort of talking about, science and movies and all that kinds of stuff. This is basically what we've done the last, however long we've known each other. So this is a pretty natural extension of that. I live in Tucson, and my fiance Zoe, and I have a podcast that I work on. I won't go into it too much, but I do that.
If you want to plug it at the end, we can do that. But we'll wait. We'll wait to the end. Well, what are some of your interests? You're a big film guy.
I am.
So what kind of stuff are you into typically?
It's definitely changed as I've grown up. Even since we hung out, I would say I think I give more kinds of movies a chance than I used to. But I would say one of the biggest genres for me is horror. My fiance Zoe, she is a really big horror fan, and so she actually, I think, got me into it more than I already was. So we actually watched Tales from the Hood, 1995. Yesterday, we'd never seen it before, and it's really good. But I love little gems like that. I like all kinds of stuff. I try to work on stuff on my own, but
cool. Yeah, I don't think I've seen that one. I might have to put that on my list.
We had never seen it. I mean, we were actually kind of surprised as we were watching it. We were like, how have we not seen this before? There's too much out there. There's too much to see. So there's always going to be stuff that slips through the cracks.
Yeah, we'll have to get into a horror movie themed episode.
Sure.
Maybe for Halloween, but. In the meantime, the Terminator. So how this is going to work is, much like every episode, we're going to start off by going through the movie. I've got a bunch of notes in front of me. We're going to kind of describe what happens in the movie through a narrative filmmaking lens. Then we'll break into a conversation about sort of the technology portrayed in the movie and how it contrasts with real AI. So
we have actually some recent stuff that we can bring up. I think Terminator is more relevant than ever, for sure. Definitely.
It is no coincidence that we're doing the Terminator for this topic. I think, and every time there's some vaguely creepy bit of news about AI, you'll always find people in the comments being like, Skynet?
It's never going to end until the kiddos that are, the people that are mostly online and stuff are young enough to be like, what the hell is that? Dude, it's slowly happening. Honestly, it's happening.
Oh God, don't even get into that.
I know, man. How old are you now? I'm 32. How old are you?
Yeah.
You're like 40, right? You're like 8 years older than me. No, I'm just no.
That's the very commonly brought up, and I think frequently much to the chagrin of people who work in the field, but we'll get into that later.
Yeah, it's definitely a very unoriginal response to literally anything that has to do with robots. It's just like Skynet, and it's like not every system created is Skynet.
Yeah, if it's not Skynet, it's 2001.
It's HAL. Yeah, it's HAL. Yeah. Good morning, Dave.
All right. Well, let's jump straight into the movie. So our first real shot of the film is we fade in over Los Angeles, late 2020s.
2020. Yep.
Yeah, 2029. And some might say that Los Angeles looks like that right now, but we'll leave that up for speculation. Yeah. And we get this text scroll explaining how the final battle for the war of the future will be fought here in our present tonight.
Present in this case is 1984.
1984, yes. And we see some of like I believe one of the HK is the hunter killers, one of the flying Terminators moving around, kind of scanning over the shot of this rubble.
This movie costs like $6, and it's amazing what they're able to do.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, extraordinarily low budget actually for movies
even compared to the
second
time. One. Yeah.
So then we get the title crawl,
which is great.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I mean, it's nothing.
It gets you so pumped.
Just letters moving past each other, but it works. It's got a very electronic feel to it.
And it just gets you excited because you can see what the letters are. They probably are saying the name of the movie, and then you finally get to see the whole title.
I would assume it was saying the name of the movie. It'd be kind of weird if it wasn't.
Weird if they were just saying other things like, live, laugh, love, or whatever.
Your ad here.
Right. Eat at Joe's.
Yeah. So our first real shot of the film actually begins kind of rather unassumingly. It's just a garbage truck driver picking up some garbage, as you do. And then there's this sort of electrical disturbance, an electrical light show. This blue kind of sphere shows up, and when it fades away, there's a naked man in it. Enter Arnold Schwarzenegger, obviously, as the Terminator. And, man, he is just ripped, just insanely buff.
Absolutely jacked, yeah.
Like
he's swole, as they say now.
Yeah,
he's told. Yeah,
even as like someone who's used to like seeing him in the later movies, where he still looks good,
incredibly buff.
Yeah, he's just insanely buff here.
He's still like kind of in that Mr. Universe phase a little bit. He had only done Conan the Barbarian before this, and also Hercules in New York, which was like a stupid whatever movie. But anyway, he barely acted in that. That was just a goofy little movie he did. Conan the Barbarian, he also had that insane physique because he did that right before this.
So, all right, so the Terminator arrives, the guy driving the garbage truck freaks out and runs off. The Terminator walk up to kind of the edge of this park overlooking Los Angeles. It's a really great kind of establishing shot.
It's a pretty famous like area now. People see it in a lot of movies with this like sort of it is. It's a pretty famous spot to like look over the whole city.
Do you know where that is exactly?
I saw it in Yes Man, and I saw it in La La Land.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So, scene transition, and now we're looking at a bunch of punks just hanging out, threatening each other.
One in particular, Bill Paxton.
Is Bill Paxton, yep.
Who was literally just like a guy who was just painting sets before, and then him and Jim Cameron started to get to be buddies, and then he's like, "Hey, you want to be in it? You can be at this other guy," and then that's how it started.
Right, but the point is these are some rough dudes, right? Like you don't want to mess with them. So obviously, it's even more impressive when the Terminator shows up, still buck-ass naked, obviously, and they're like, "Hey, what's wrong with this picture?"
It's like he's a couple of cans short of a six-pack.
Yeah. He demands their clothes. They try to stab him. It doesn't hurt him at all,
Does not go
obviously.
well.
They try to stab him, and I'm not sure exactly what happens. I've always interpreted it as he punches a hole through one of them.
Into the guy, yeah. Everyone thinks he rips his heart out, but he doesn't hold a heart. He's just covered in blood. So I think he literally just stuck his hand
I think he just punches him so hard that it just rips a hole through him.
It's pretty gnarly. And as far as I know, everyone says Bill Paxton dies in the scene. All that happens is he's thrown against a fence. Nothing else happens. As far as I'm concerned, he's unconscious. That's what I'm saying. I'm sorry. If you didn't see it happen, he's alive in canon.
So the Terminator kind of advances on the last punk who begins stripping. So the implication is obviously that he gets his clothes. Cut to downtown Los Angeles, dirty-looking alleyway, and we see another electrical ball show up, and another nude guy falls out of it. Enter Michael Biehn as Kyle Reese. And he walks up to this hobo who's laying in the alley, and the next shot is a cop car pulling up to investigate this kind of bright light, see what it's about. And we see Michael Biehn putting this dude's pants on. By the way, I'm not convinced it's a great idea to steal pants from like a hobo and just kind of run around freeballing it.
I hope he got different clothes. I'm pretty sure he gets different clothes on later. But yeah, that's gross.
So the cops engage in a chase with him. It's kind of through a shopping mall at night. Oh, I'm sorry. Before that, yeah, Reese sort of grapples with one of the cops, and he gets his gun, and he's like, "What day is it? The date." Obviously implying that he's, from the future. And then there's a chase through the shopping mall, and he grabs himself like a jacket and a pair of shoes, and he gets nice through there. Yeah. He also grabs a shotgun out of the cop car, makes his way back to it after the police have left, and then he kind of disappears out into the streets. Having given the cops the slip. And I should mention here, this isn't really a huge spoiler because the movie's pretty old at this point, but I do think this is very much intended to be ambiguous. I mean, Reese seems like he could potentially be a bad guy as well, and the movie very much does play that, like, you don't know exactly what either of these two people want with.
They're just if you pay attention to the future or to the text at the beginning, they're probably from the future, but you don't know what one of them is more hostile than the other, in my opinion. It's like,
But yeah, you're not totally sure of their motivations with Sarah Connor, and we cut to her riding like a scooter down the street and clocking into work, and there's some
waitress job.
There's some nice banter here with her. With her coworkers. This kid drops some ice cream into the pouch of her waitress uniform. It's nice to see that, in 40 years since then, people are still treating wait staff like crap.
Like literally when he does that, in the background, you can hear one of the guys in the booth go, "Way to go, kid. Ought to give you the tip." Yeah. And it's like, what an asshole.
God.
Horrible. And then there's her little friend's like, look at it this way, in 100 years who's going to care?
Yeah, as if that solves the problem at the moment. But, so the next scene is the Terminator visiting the gun shop. He asks about a bunch of different guns, Uzi 9mm,
phase plasma rifle with a 40-watt range.
Displaying that once again that he knows about weapons and that he's from the future. He shoots the clerk and takes all the guns.
If you're confused by the plot of this movie at this point, you're not really paying attention. It's pretty straightforward. Mm-hmm. There's a guy who's from the future. If you're going, who's that at that point? I mean, there's nothing really that can be done.
So then there's we're back out on the street, and there's a guy on the phone. Terminator just grabs him and like chucks him away from the phone, and we see that he's looking at the phone book, looking for the address of Sarah Connor. There's a few different Sarah Connors in there. Now, for those of you who don't know, a phone book is, how do I describe this? It's like it's kind of like the contacts list on your phone, but it's on paper. And it's just the names of random people who live around your city. It's not anyone you know personally, is the weird part. So we see that there's a bunch of Sarah Connors. We cut to the residence of the first Sarah Connor. The Terminator runs over like a little toy truck. This is a nice bit of foreshadowing for later in the movie. We'll get to it when it happens. And also, as he walks up to the house, there's a dog barking at him. Obviously, dogs are prone to bark at strangers, but we're going to find out later. This is also a nice bit of foreshadowing. And he knocks on the door of the woman inside it. She answers it, and he just kind of kicks the door off its hinges, and it flies open. It highlights how physically strong he is, and he kills this woman. Now we're going to rejoin Kyle Reese.
It's important to note that he asks her who she is, and she replies Sarah Connor.
Yes, that's true. Good point.
So that's another, they're just telling the audience, okay, he's after.
Now we're going to rejoin Kyle Reese in having stolen a car, and he's hot wiring this car. He's kind of outside of a construction facility, and we get this cool transition between like the treads of the construction vehicle. and the treads of a ground HK, which is a gigantic mobile tank. Tanks are mobile. Mobile tank seems a bit redundant. So, but it's got laser cannons on it, and we get some more scenes of the future war. There's so many skulls here, just so many skulls. I mean, I get that it's to imply that people die, but are people 90% skull? Where are all the other bones?
Yeah, right.
And there's some more of the future war scene. Kyle kind of drives off in this Jeep that's sort of got this laser cannon on the back, and it's shot and it flips over and starts to burn. I don't know if this is supposed to be like an actual memory of his or if he's just having a nightmare. It's not really clear. But then we're going to transition to Sarah's house, and her roommate. They get up to some good old 80s shenanigans with her roommate's.
Pretty funny.
Yeah, her roommate's boyfriend calls, and he tries to like seduce her over the phone, unaware that he's talking to Sarah.
He's got this whole rehearsed thing. Mm-hmm. Because once he actually gets on the phone with his actual girlfriend, he starts from the beginning in the exact same way, which is a very funny bit of. I like movies that don't have to be one thing all the time. Yes, it's a scary horror sci-fi movie, but it is funny. It's a funny movie. Mm-hmm. Like when,
yeah. There's some good bits of comedy in there. Now, I believe this happens off screen, but the Terminator has killed a second Sarah Connor.
Yes.
We cut to the police station where they're talking about the fact that both of these deaths occurred in the same order that they did in the phone book. And so this guy is the phone book killer. And they're going to try and get a hold of the third Sarah Connor, i.e. our Sarah, the main character. So we're going to rejoin the primary Sarah back in her house, and she has this really cool iguana. For some reason. And we see her coming out into the parking lot and getting onto her scooter, and she's really nervous. She's looking around, looking into the parking structure in the dark, and she's nervous that someone's following her. And as she pulls out, sure enough, Kyle Reese is in the car, and he drives after her.
Starts trailing her.
Mm-hmm. Now we're at the police station, and the cops call the answering machine. The answering machines, how do I explain this? They're like voicemail, but it was a dedicated thing. That
it had its own. It was its own device
mm-hmm.
that you had to get.
Not that even anyone even checks their own voicemail anymore. I can't remember the last time I checked my voicemail. It's like, just text me if you've got something important to say.
It's honestly, it's not irrelevant, but it's definitely been pushed aside because people can just text it if it's really important.
Speaking of important, though, this answering machine is important. This is going to be how the Terminator learns that Sarah's at the club. We'll get to that in a little bit. But it's an instance of technology causing problems in this movie. And that's obviously a theme.
A lot of people say, when they talk about horror films and things like that, it's hard to set them in, the present because there's so much technology that you're never completely disconnected from people. And so it's harder for characters to get in real trouble. Mm-hmm. It's harder for the writer to come up with a way to get them in a situation where they can't call for help. Mm-hmm. But even in the 80s, there was stuff that, that was making it difficult for people to completely disappear, and there still could be stalked by somebody who just knew how to pay attention to the technology around them,
Yeah. And now people are just, posting their whereabouts at all times on Facebook without any regard to who might be wanting to know if they're not home.
Or if they're home themselves.
So Sarah's at a bar, and she learns that there's of the two other dead Sarah Connors, and she realizes she's next. She goes to the club, Tech Noir.
I know tries, it's on Pinko.
Yeah. And she tries to use the phone there to call the police, but she can't get through. All their lines are busy. Back at Sarah's house, the Terminator shows up, and this is yet another instance of tech screwing people over. Ginger, her roommate, is listening to music really loud through her headphones.
She does this all the time.
Yeah.
We've seen her.
And doesn't hear the Terminator enter through the sliding glass door. Lock your sliding glass doors, people. And not that it would save you from a Terminator, but, you know.
It would have stopped. It would have at least alerted the boyfriend. You know what I mean? It would have alerted him earlier.
So the Terminator kills her, Ginger's boyfriend, and then kills Sarah's roommate. Now, at this point, he does not know whether or not the woman he has just killed is Sarah Connor. That's about to change because Sarah calls from the club and leaves a message on the machine, IDing herself and telling her roommate where she is. So therefore, the Terminator now knows where she is. And
he also finds her ID.
Yeah, that's important. So he finds her ID, so he now knows what she looks like, and he tracks her down at the club. And there's this really, really cool kind of eerie sequence of shots.
Probably my favorite sequence in the whole movie.
Yeah, where there's this really kind of peppy '80s music playing, and the Terminator's like walking through this crowd of people. It's kind of in slow motion. And
the song gets more and more echoey.
Yeah, and he's looking for Sarah, and then like the song kind of gets really echoey right as he finds her and pulls a gun on her. But just as he's about to shoot her, Kyle Reese intervenes. He pulls out a shotgun and unloads into the Terminator. So there's a bit of a shootout in the club here. There's some really nice quick camera work and some quick cuts that really make this firefight feel really frenetic. And there's this cool bit where Kyle just jumps out from behind cover and just unloads his entire shotgun on the Terminator. And then after he goes down, the Terminator goes down for a moment from just the force of all those shotgun slugs. While he's still kind of recovering, Kyle runs up to Sarah, who's on the floor at this point, and he says,
"Come with me if you want to live."
Yes. The immortal line.
And she's obviously now seeing the Terminator get back up after being shot like a million times, and so she's freaking out. So her best option is to go with Kyle at this point, who's obviously trying to protect her in some way. It gets going at this point for sure.
Mm-hmm. So now we're out in the alleyway. Reese is leading her out to the car he has, and there's this really, really tense electronic score playing as the Terminator chases them, and we get to see what they call thermovision. It's this red overlay of the Terminator's point of view as it tracks them.
A bunch of numbers that you don't know what they do.
Just a series of numbers, really could be anything, but
it's some kind of data.
Reese shoots the gas tank of the car that's in front of his car, and it blows up. And it kind of
pretty cool.
It singes the Terminator's hair. So now
and his eyebrows.
Now his hair's all spiky. But he jumps through the fire, all badass. He punches his way through the window.
Tries to grab Sarah.
Yeah, and Reese kind of reverses the car and spins it around so that the Terminator flies off of it. And then there's a cop who sees this happen, and he radios in to the police department, and the Terminator steals that cop's car and goes after them. And
this is a case where he brutalizes somebody but doesn't necessarily kill them.
Mm-hmm.
He just kind of knocks them out. He doesn't just indiscriminately kill. He does it when it's convenient. By
the way, the T-800 responds to the police dispatch here in the voice of the cop that he just knocked out. So we know that the T-800 is capable of mimicking voices. So we're back in the Reese's car with Sarah, who's freaking out. And Reese is like, "I've been assigned to protect you. You've been targeted for termination." And
it's really nerdy crap.
Yeah.
You know?
And he's saying it's not a man, it's a machine. This Terminator who's a Cyberdyne Systems Model 101, as if that he expects that to mean anything to her.
I know. He also tells her his full rank or whatever, his military rank and all the numbers, and it's like whatever.
As if she cares.
Oh, okay, so you're with that company. Okay, that's good.
But no, I mean, joking aside, this is a really great way to deliver exposition. If
put it in an action scene.
some kind of exposition dump. Yeah, putting it in the middle of an action scene is a really great way to keep things moving and develop the plot at the same time.
And he does. He keeps this movie moving by this point. From this point on, very few instances of like downtime. The movie like really moves.
Yeah. There is an instance of downtime coming up right now, actually, because they pull into a parking lot where Reese is like, "I've got to ditch this car," but it works because it's kind of a reprieve from the action. They're
still being tracked, so there is suspense.
There's some tension, and we get to spend a little bit more time knowing these characters, seeing how Sarah reacts to what she's being told. Sarah and Reese, they hide from the cops and the Terminator. Reese, we unspool some more backstory for us. We find that the Terminator is a product of Cyberdyne Systems, a defense network computer that got smart. Too smart.
Science gone wrong.
Yeah, and it seized control of nuclear weapons and initiated like a nuclear exchange with Russia, and then basically started hunting down anyone who wasn't killed in the nuclear war
strikes
with Terminators. Eventually, the T-800 it does find them again, and there's this really cool shotgun duel between both of the moving cars as the T-800 tracks them down and chases after them. Yeah, and here this is really a great example of kind of the genre-bending nature of this film. It's not just a sci-fi. It's very much a horror movie as well. And this is the unstoppable monster. As Reese says, this thing will never ever stop
until you're dead.
Yeah. Reese manages to kind of shake the Terminator. Terminator's car plows into a wall, but so does the car that Reese and Sarah are in, and the cops catch up with them, and they're taken into custody. So now we're in the police station, and we meet Dr. Silberman, who's going to be like a really great antagonist character in T2, but
he's got a smaller role in this one, but
he's still a dick, yeah. And he plays it very well.
Yeah, he's great.
Now, the T-800 kind of has, those scenes in movies where, like, in action movies where the hero kind of patches himself up, like in Die Hard, where, like...
It's really cool. It's
Bruce
like we
Willis.
get to see it, but he's the bad guy.
Yeah. The T-800 essentially repairs itself. It pulls out, like, its damaged eye.
He breaks into a hotel room, and he's just, like, in a crappy... Not even a hotel, a motel room. Like a Roach Motel. No one's checking it because it's like, who cares? It's a pretty gnarly scene, but it's great. It gives a bit more character to him, even though he is a robot. It is character. But yeah.
For sure. And here we see him put on like the sunglasses. That'll be
the iconic sunglasses. Yeah.
So at the police station, Silverman is interviewing Reese, and we get a little bit more backstory here, who kind of explains the nature of the Time War. And
in which case, Silverman actually sort of, in a meta way, sort of pokes holes in the plot of the film, in which Reese has to then clarify things for the audience too. Like, why didn't they just do this or that? Like, why this elaborate scheme with the Terminator? They actually say that in the movie. Like, why?
yeah, and this is really fantastic. It's a skeptical character asking interesting and relevant questions that the audience probably has. And
skeptical audience members, probably, who aren't as willing to just go with it,
So Sarah's kind of watching this interview with Reese, and we get to see how her and all the other characters in the room react to this information dump, and that's another great way to just not just bludgeon the audience over the head with info. It's characterization at the same time.
Right.
Now eventually the Terminator does show up. And he asks the desk sergeant there if he can see Sarah Connor. He says she's busy, so the Terminator says, "I'll be back."
He kind of takes a look at the whole room, and then takes a look at everything, and then says, "I'll be back."
Being back, incidentally, means driving a vehicle into a building, and
that's the Terminator's version of "I'll be back." Driving a car through a reception desk.
So he smashes the car into the building, and then he gets out with his guns and he just starts mowing down all the cops.
It's really brutal.
Yeah, he was certainly a threat before, but like this really underscores like, oh man, there's nobody who can help him.
Yeah, they'd have to send in the army or something.
Yeah,
you know what I mean, like.
But Reese escapes his handcuffs and is able to reunite with Sarah. He leads her out to the car, and they manage to escape from the Terminator. The next scene is them kind of ditching the car. I'm not sure if it ran out of fuel or if they just needed to get rid of it.
Yeah, something like that.
Sarah and Kyle talk, and we learn some more about John Connor, Sarah's son, who will be the leader of the Resistance in the future. Now, John never
don't know anything about, really.
Yeah, John never says much about his dad for reasons that we're gonna get into, but we do get some more look into Sarah's psychology here. She never asked for this, like the guy from Deus Ex. She never asked for this. But no, it's a good point. I mean,
yeah, she's like, do I look like my mom from the future? Like, I can't even balance my checkbook. That's what she says.
Yeah.
She doesn't have a lot of confidence in herself as a leader.
Because the reality is everyone likes to think of themselves as like a leader and someone who could take charge in a dangerous situation. But the reality is that that's precious few people.
Yeah.
It
doesn't make you a bad person if you can't do that. But it's just very few people that can really step up like that.
Mm-hmm. Now we get another flashback sequence with Reese, and he's in the future, and we learn that dogs are used to detect Terminators. That's why the dog was barking at the T-800 earlier. And we also see a photo of Sarah that John gave to Reese at some point, and we kind of get a sense of what Sarah might mean to him. Now, the Terminator has gotten the address of Sarah's mother's house. Sarah is believed she's talking to her mom, but in practice she's talking to the Terminator, and she
has probably killed her mom.
Yeah. I don't believe we actually see the body, but it's implied.
You see that there's been a break-in, though. And so
Sarah gives her mom the address of the hotel, which means the Terminator's got the address of the hotel that Reese and Sarah are staying at. But now we're going to go back to that hotel where Reese is making some pipe bombs. It's a pipe bomb. You guys remember Potter Puppet Bells? No? Okay.
He's making like plastic and pipe bombs and stuff like that. Yeah.
That night at the hotel, Kyle divulges his feelings for Sarah. It's very romantic. He's like, I came across time for you, Sarah.
Time for you, Sarah. Yeah. It's a good line, and it works.
Yeah. I wish I could come up with something half as romantic, but that also, in practice, that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense.
You need to actually have done the thing. You actually had to have done the thing in order for that line to work. You can't just say it. He literally did the thing. So
Reese is mad at himself, and he begins very roughly stuffing the pipe bombs into a bag. I'm not convinced that's a great idea, but
considering he was on about like how she was screwing the caps on earlier, and now he's all stuffing things in there.
But Sarah accepts him, and they have sex. And if you're starting to get an idea of who John Connor's father might be,
you're on the right track.
Yeah. So the Terminator comes to their hotel room and he shoots it up, but they've already realized he's arrived, and they're out in the parking lot where they steal another car.
A dog alerts them.
Yeah. Good point. And the Terminator gets back on his motorcycle, and we have another chase scene where they use up the majority of the pipe bombs that they created. It's like when I play a video game, I'm always hoarding like all the explosives just in case I get into a boss encounter, because you never know.
You never know.
Kyle is shot by the Terminator, and the truck they're in flips over. The Terminator gets off his motorcycle and then is promptly hit by a truck, and what we presume is karma for running over the toy truck earlier.
Yes, all came back around. That's what the movie's ultimately about.
Be nice to children's toys.
Revenge.
Yeah. Fun fact: this was actually the genesis for Toy Story. Not many people know that. So, it's interesting how both the first two movies end with a chase involving a tanker truck. I'm just realizing.
Yeah,
that.
And then that ends up in a factory of some kind.
So the Terminator steals the tanker truck and he tries to run down Sarah and Kyle. Kyle slips the last pipe bomb, I guess one of them, into the back of the truck's tailpipe, and it explodes.
It's a pretty good explosion.
Yeah, it's pretty badass.
They shoot it from like 7 different angles just to show you how cool it was.
Sarah looks at the explosion, the rookie mistake. You know, you don't look at explosions.
I know, you turn away from them and walk away. Yep.
It seems like the Terminator is dead, and Kyle and Sarah reunite, and the music gets all soft.
You see his body like burning, and then he falls,
but turns out just the flesh burnt off, and the Terminator rises out of the wreckage, of the flaming wreckage. And apparently, this kind of visual of the Terminator rising out of like flaming wreckage, is the content of the nightmare that James Cameron had that initially inspired the movie.
Yeah,
apparently.
In that version, he had a knife, but other than that, it was pretty much the same thing.
Which does seem. I'm glad they got rid of the knife. That would seem a little silly in retrospect. It's like you already weigh like 2 tons and could punch holes through people. Is the knife really doing anything for you at this point?
Exactly. But yeah, so that was a piece of art that he did. You can actually find the original piece of art that he did, Jim Cameron's kind of vision of his nightmare that he had, which inspired the Terminator.
Yeah, that's cool.
It's very cool.
So they end up in a factory. This is the Cyberdyne factory, actually. It's funny. I never realized that because there is a deleted scene where they explain exactly what they're doing. And their plan is to go to the Cyberdyne factory and sabotage it. But that scene was cut. So
now they just kind of end up there.
Yeah.
But it's not even that clear that that's what that factory is. So in the final cut of the movie, it could just be a factory.
Yeah, and it does explain how Cyberdyne gets their hands on the remains of the Terminator from the first film. We see that in T2. But so they're at the factory. Kyle kind of turns on some of the machinery to create like electro noise interference as cover. And
cover! So they can't track us!
But crucially, because he has turned the power on to all the machines, this also does something else. This enables the hydraulic press to be used. And that's going to come in shortly here.
See, these are things that are done deliberately in a script so that things make sense later.
Yeah, and so the Terminator catches up with them in stop motion. It's
actually terrifying.
Yeah, there's something that adds to the creepiness, actually, it being like stop motion. Now Kyle picks up like a steel pipe, and it's not super effective against the Terminator, but at least he tries.
He tries.
But he places a pipe bomb in the T-800's ribcage, and that blast destroys the robot's legs. It wounds Sarah, and it kills Reese.
It's a pretty abrupt death for him, but that's kind of the point, I think.
Yeah. Now the Terminator reactivates and starts dragging itself along. So at
this point,
it's got
like usually
an
the
arm
biggest
and a
scare
half,
in the movie.
Basically. Yeah.
It's usually the biggest shock in the movie when the Terminator still gets back up after Reese dies, and he's still coming, and the music gets even more like a horror film with these really high pitched strings, like Psycho. Mm-hmm. It's really done well. Really done well.
No, yeah, and I mean, yeah. If this it goes to show just how, durable this thing is. It survived multiple explosions already. So now Sarah crawls into the hydraulic press and out the other side of it, and she kind of shuts this grate on it so that the T-800 can't come through, and she activates the press, and she's like, "You're terminated," and it's really cool.
It's really cool, actually. And that does it.
And yeah, that finally kills it. And just the arm and like a little bit of the head are left intact, as we'll find out in the second movie.
Mm-hmm.
There's a shot of emergency services showing up at the factory. They cart Kyle's dead body away and they take Sarah to the hospital. Now we cut to Sarah driving down the road in a Jeep. We see that she's carrying a revolver with her, and she's got this big dog with her.
Mm-hmm.
And
German Shepherd with her. Mm-hmm.
Apparently that was James Cameron's dog, actually. Fun fact.
Oh, really? That makes sense. They weren't supposed to be filming out there, by the way.
Oh, really?
They didn't have a permit to film on that road. No, they actually had to do it between visits from the cops who were wondering what they were doing. The studio literally told them, just tell them you're students. And they did. Just to get a couple of shots.
So, we see that she's creating like a number of tapes for John to listen to when he gets older. We also get to see where the photo of Sarah originates from. This kid takes a photo of her with like a Kodak. It's one of the ones that actually prints out the
photo.
Yeah. I'm forgetting what those are called at the moment. Spacing. Yep. There's a certain term for them. Polaroid. There we go. Yeah.
Polaroid photo.
And then there's...
She's aware of the coming storm. She's prepared.
that kid, after he gives her the photo and gets the money from her, he says to his grandfather something in Spanish, and Sarah says, "What did he say?" And then the old man's like, "A storm is coming." And then we close in on Sarah's face, and she says, "I know."
I know.
Yeah.
It's all sounds like Batman. No.
Mm-hmm.
And then we drive off into a matte painting of a mountain.
Yes, a matte painting. Yes.
Yes, for some reason. Not just the actual landscape that was there. Maybe they didn't like it.
Yeah, you told me they couldn't find
a road that leads up to a mountain.
Leads to a storm? Yeah, come on. I know it's Southern California, but come on, it rains.
And wait a few minutes, and then we did it. We remember the whole movie.
And that in a nutshell is the Terminator, and that
is the Terminator.
And obviously, this movie had just a massive effect on pop culture. I mean, it was a huge hit at the box office, and so for the second one,
definitely made way more money because it was such a low budget. It actually made a lot of money compared to its it was really profitable.
Yeah, and so for the second one, the studio just threw all the money at James Cameron. And he made...
He said the opening sequence cost about as much as the whole first movie.
And he made one of the best movie sequels ever with that money. I genuinely think T2 might be one of a few movies that are actually better than its predecessor.
That's interesting. I love the first two, but the first one is still my favorite one.
Oh, yeah?
The first one's still, it's like one of my favorite movies. I mean, T2 is as well, but it's not as higher up. I just have a lot of respect for the process of that movie and what it did with what it had.
Mm-hmm.
I guess there's a lot of different, it's not just the movie. I guess there's a lot of things that surround it that color your opinions about it, And in this case, I guess the story behind making it made me appreciate it even more.
For sure. Yeah, it definitely shows, gosh, the budgets of movies these days just get bigger and bigger. But, I think...
It's insane.
I think it really does show that you do not need a massive budget to make a movie that
people are very aware that there's a lot of wasteful spending in Hollywood. The budgets are just outrageous.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And, obviously the other thing it would do is go on to influence the way we talk about artificial intelligence and robotics. And
Exactly.
as we said, anytime something kind of creepy happens with either of those two things, people are always talking about the Terminator. And for that reason, we're going to talk AI as it relates to the Terminator right after we take a quick break. So if you're interested in that, stick around. So, in this part, we're basically going to try and define artificial intelligence, kind of try and demystify that a little bit. And then I'm going to talk about the history of it a little. We'll get into where it's going, try and hit on, if there's such a thing as like superintelligence, and is this Terminator conception of AI, does it have any merits to it?
Right. Is it even possible or whatever?
But just to begin, why even talk about the Terminator in relation to AI? And the reason for that is just because I think, for better or worse, I think this is something that is much to the chagrin of people who work in the field. Well, this is constantly brought up in relation to AI.
It's like people say Skynet shorthand all the time.
Yeah.
They say Skynet.
For better or worse, it's a cultural touchstone. And if you're going to talk about it, I think you've kind of got to deal with that. It is at least a good way to lead a discussion about it. A good jumping off point. And to be fair, the movies actually do get more than you would expect right. In the second one, I believe Arnold says...
they even touch on a lot of it, in the second film.
My CPU is a neural net processor, a learning computer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry about that atrocious accent, but
I actually thought Arnold was sitting here right in front of me.
Oh yeah, no, right. Actually, I just called him up on Cameo and was like, "Hey, can you say that line?" Right, but yeah, a neural net processor, a neural network. That's a term you'll hear constantly.
Yeah, they don't just make shit up. Just they did their research for sure.
Absolutely. So we're gonna get into this a little bit, but I want to start out by addressing kind of, I think, the biggest thing that throws people off when they think about AI and relate it to Terminator, which is the distinction between mind and body, essentially.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So, when a lot of people think of AI, they implicitly think of robotics. And robots...
Like a robot.
Yeah, robots are the body, AI is the mind, and it is possible to have one without the other. You can basically have extremely simple robots that do nothing but pick up and put down parts on an assembly line. Mm-hmm. We wouldn't really consider that. There's a lot of people who wouldn't really call that intelligence in any shape or form.
No,
but
it's just automation. Yeah.
Yeah, but that is nonetheless, I think, part of that is a way of conceiving of intelligence. So just keep that in mind as we go forward. Well, I'm going to be using the terms AI and intelligence, but I'm talking about something aside from robots and the ability to have a body and carry out actions.
Right. In fact, the films touch on this. The second movie, if you just go off the first two movies, all they talk about is when Skynet first awakens, it's just a computer system that controls things.
Mm-hmm.
By the third one, they changed the timeline a bit because they supposedly postponed it. So by the time it actually happens, which I forget what year it happens, not 97, but early 2000s, they already have robots, the people behind the machines with the AI, they already have these early security droids, the T1s. And I think that was kind of one of those things where it's well, maybe if we just have it'll be interesting if we saw an early Terminator. But, there's nothing that the first two films imply that they had killer robots ready to go right when the shit hit the fan. It was just a computer system. And it tapped into it. It used our resources against us. It didn't, and our prejudices. In fact, they attacked Russia first, and then Russia retaliated. which destroyed the world essentially.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. Yeah, I think the films do get more correct than a lot of people give them credit for, but let's take a moment to really define intelligence as I'm going to be using it, and as a lot of people who work in the field use it. So when I say intelligence, I'm going to be meaning narrowly the ability for some actor, some agent, to carry out an action and accomplish a goal. And with computers, that's basically their ability to use some algorithm to carry out a series of steps and accomplish a goal. Now, algorithms used to be entirely hard-coded. That's not the case anymore. AIs aren't explicitly programmed anymore, and instead they use a set of mathematical algorithms that essentially allows the system to change itself and certain portions of those algorithms. What this does is it allows the system to take some input data, just some data as input, and it'll make a prediction about how that data is related to the goal it's trying to accomplish, and then runs it through some very sophisticated mathematical functions and transformation. It runs the input data through those. And then output is just essentially a decision about the next step, the next action that should be taken. I hope I've summarized that in an accessible way. That's basically how AI functions nowadays. In the past, all this stuff would have to have been written by hand, but now it's a system that can kind of make edits to its own predictions.
Basically, it can change its mind. It can, with new information, it discovers a different result, or it basically isn't bound by its operational, like whatever's encoded in what it's supposed to do. It can make independent decisions.
Yeah, so the learning part of machine learning just refers to the fact that when given data, it basically reads that data, interprets it, and makes an assumption or prediction about how that data is related to an action or goal, and then with more data, it just gets better at doing that, basically. Mm-hmm. And that's something else you'll hear if you read about AI, is this term big data. That just refers to huge data sets that are used to train these very sophisticated algorithms. Mm-hmm. And you can also just kind of think about this in terms of optimization. The way that computer scientists describe intelligence, it's just the ability for a system to optimize the actions it's taking for a specific goal. That's another way of thinking about it.
That's a good way to put it.
So, all right, that's kind of how we're going to be talking about intelligence, how we'll be using it in this discussion. The kind of intelligence that we see in, the Terminator and other AI movies is what AI scientists would call artificial general intelligence. Mm-hmm. And the general there just distinguishes between a narrow intelligence, like we said earlier, might just be an extremely simple robot that just picks up and puts down parts, and general intelligence, which is the ability to learn from the environment and do a wide variety of different things, much like us humans, right?
Right. Having goals that aren't necessarily baked in, but goals that it comes upon itself. It can independently come up with its own whatever it wants to do, based on what it wants to do or what it needs to do.
Yes, it just refers to being able to learn from experience and extrapolate and apply principles learned in one area to another to achieve a wide variety of different goals, as you said. So you can see how that's a really powerful thing, right? A general intelligence that can learn from a variety of different situations and apply those principles to different things. That's an incredibly powerful thing, and where it gets tricky and potentially a little scary is that there's some possibility that an AI might become so intelligent, so kind of adept at manipulating information, that it makes changes to its own code and begins to make its own decisions about the kinds of constraints it should have. And even if it doesn't, and even if it completely operates within the constraints we humans have put on it, there's no guarantee that an unexpected, dangerous results won't occur. And you can kind of see that in the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey. Hal, in that movie, is essentially operating exactly within the mission parameters given to him. It's not so much that Hal has gone rogue. It's he's trying to satisfy the contradictory nature of two different instructions he's been given. Hal believed that the most likely way to make the mission succeed was to kill off the crew, essentially.
What was the first mission? What were the two goals it was given?
Hal is basically told, you need to get the ship to the objective, even if the crew is dead. And also, don't tell the crew anything about this, right?
He's been told to do this by mission control?
Yeah.
Okay. I forgot about that part.
Yeah. Hal was never told to keep the crew alive. Essentially, it has a single prime objective, and the crew is threatening this directive, so Hal deals with them.
Yeah, because they decide that they actually don't want to go, right?
Yeah. So you can kind of see how, even if an AI is operating completely within the constraints,
right, because he doesn't have the same kind of moral, ethical. I mean, of course, if there was another way, Hal would have probably chosen that avenue, but he basically just thinks like, well, they're not letting me go there, so that's a problem, and I've been given this mission, and they're becoming an obstacle, so they need to be removed. And only someone who's like, if it was a person, obviously we would think that they were a psycho or something, but it's a computer basically just being like, well, I don't know what to tell you. You're preventing me from doing my job, and off the way you go.
That's something really important to realize, is that, an AI need not be like what we would consider evil or malevolent to
just instant all humans must die.
Yeah.
Like Ultron. He's like, I need to cleanse the world.
Yeah, to potentially do a lot of damage. So this was laid out in this book by this guy named Nick Bostrom. And he wrote a book called Superintelligence that kind of tracks past history and potential future of intelligence. And one of the things that he argues is the pace of technology invention has just been increasing over time. So, here, as an example, to kind of become productive enough to sustain 1 more million people 100,000 years ago, it would have taken basically an additional million years of labor to accomplish that. Now, that can basically be done in hours. You know, we have these really complex methods of like factory farming that can accomplish that in hours. So yeah, the rate of technological progress is just accelerating and continuing to accelerate. Now, machines are already capable of imitating human reasoning and outperforming humans on certain tasks. And you can look at like automated spam filtration for this. That's something computers actually do really well and have done well in my lifetime. You youngins out there, bless yourself if you've never had to deal with this, but when I was like in high school, I remember my inbox just being filled with spam.
Yeah, it was horrible.
Yeah, but you know, if you've got like just like your Gmail account nowadays, it's more or less stuff. All of it's relevant in some fashion or another, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's pretty much all from something. We have like the opposite problem. There's too many things that we're signed up with now, and so we get a ton of emails, but they're all from things we have to pay attention to. Which is okay, which means we don't have to delete a lot as much, but you know, the spam was its own issue. Like, I mean, you would lose emails like constantly because like.
Yeah, it was pretty terrible. So that's a really concrete way that computers' ability to understand natural language has advanced just within the past decade. It used to be really limited. The big limitation to accomplishing these kinds of things was just processing power. Obviously, the more complex a task is, the more processing power you need. And until like the 1990s, when artificial neural networks became a big thing, hardware was the main limitation. That's not really true anymore. We've kind of surpassed that, and data is now like the big limitation. Just finding the right data, finding the right amount of data to work with. If things kind of continue to advance at this scale, if computers and machines continue to get more and more sophisticated, is it possible that an artificial general intelligence might emerge at some point? So according to a recent survey of international experts at the second conference on AGI done in 2009, they estimated that machines as smart as humans will happen by 2075, and that a superintelligence might exist 30 years after that.
Okay.
There was also a different set of predictions made by a group of scientists from Oxford who have published over 200 articles on the subject and basically surveyed the AI community, asked them, when do you think AGI is likely to happen? And they estimated 50% of them thought it was likely to happen by 2040. 90% of them thought it was likely to happen by 2075.
Unfortunately, this is only, and this is just as an aside, I'm not surprised that some of our estimates have been pushed back a bit. Yeah. Because I can see, these people that make these predictions, they kind of look at where the sectors of the technology that's going to be raking in engineers and scientists, people working on it. And I can guarantee you that they're very aware that if we actually get our shit together, much of science will be trying to fix or contain climate change issues. Much of our resources and energy will be going towards mitigation and coming up with and now that might lead to all kinds of advances we haven't even anticipated. But I'm not surprised that we're kind of shifting focus a little bit because, I think scientists especially are not idiots, and so they can see the forest through the trees,
Certainly, it depends on how well funded the sector is, how much interest there is in it. That's certainly a great point.
Who knows? They probably have all kinds of other reasons why they've kind of revised their estimates. But I'm not. It doesn't surprise me because think about it. 2040 is only 18 years away. You really think we're going to be dealing with AI at that point? I feel like we've just got bigger fish to fry right now. And I don't know. Maybe it might happen in isolated places for a while, very sporadic and little advancements. But I can totally see it taking another few decades for sure. 2070s sounds.
Yeah, thanks for bringing up that about that revisement, because that survey I just quoted to you was done in 2013. A more recent one done in 2019 interviewed 32 AI experts and asked them to give their predictions. This time, 45% of them said that it would happen before 2060. And 34% said that it would happen after 2060. The remaining percent basically predicted that were either unsure or predicted that it wouldn't happen at all. But
for whatever reason they had.
Yeah, but it sounds like the consensus is between 2060 to 2075. Which is certainly a long time.
It's not really. We really thought, I think for a long time, I think even back in high school, I think you and I were pretty sure that we would start seeing robot companions in the 2020s. They were just going to be mainly automation type of robots helping with, either dangerous work or military application or, helping the elderly or, whatever, kind of like when iRobot, the Will Smith one, you see robots walking dogs and someone that's in 2032. So that's in 10 years, so I'm pretty sure that we've missed the mark on that too. But in 2004 when it came out, I was like, oh yeah, totally. I was totally sure. I was very naive, but yeah, our priorities have shifted, and I can see how it's going to take a while longer till we get there.
Yeah, that's the general timeline, at least our best guess of the timeline. So now the question becomes, if, an AGI, some super sophisticated superintelligence were to arise, how might it do so? And there's a few different ways that that this essentially might occur. One possible way that this might happen through what they call reinforcement learning. Reinforcement learning is a lot of what it sounds like. Humans learn through various types of positive and negative reinforcement as well. So basically in reinforcement learning, you take this AI agent and you put it in sort of a game-like situation, and the computer just employs trial and error. It's just a process of trial and error until it finds the solution to the problem. And for every step it makes towards achieving the goal that's been defined for it, the computer gets a little reward, basically. It gets like a score. And it desires to essentially see that score go up. So effectively, to get the machine to do what its engineers want, the AI is rewarded or penalized for certain actions, and its goal is to simply maximize that reward score.
Right.
So typically, the designer will set reward policy, which is basically the rules of the game, and then they just let the AI agent run free. They don't really give it any hints or suggestions. It's up to the model to figure out how to perform the task and maximize its reward. What's shocking about this is just how unpredictable it can be in a lot of ways. There was kind of a famous experiment that went kind of viral, at least in the AI community, a couple of years back. I believe it was a group of engineers at DeepMind created this hide-and-seek game in a simulated kind of 3D environment and placed a couple of, AI avatars in there and just let them run loose. It was in sort of a maze, and it had these, little blocks just placed randomly in there. The AIs eventually learned to take these blocks and push them up against the sides of the maze, and then just jump on top of them and get over the boundary to clear the barricades and find the hider more efficiently. And they didn't realize this was possible, basically. This was something that completely surprised even the engineers. Anytime when you have a really complex environment, it's very, very difficult to predict how something that can learn from experience will interact with that environment. So that's one of the ways that superintelligence could effectively emerge. You can actually kind of see this in some of the movies, right? So I was just saying something that essentially learns from its environment. I believe in the second movie, Arnold's the Terminator is able to learn from experience. And he becomes essentially more human-like the more he interacts with the main characters. To get super nerdy on you real quick, this isn't actually explained in the original version of the movie. There's kind of a cut scene where they...
Which is... for me, there's weirdly no perfect cut of T2, because there's stuff I like in the extended version, and then there's stuff I don't like.
Yeah.
So the ending is terrible. The new ending is so... cringe, but it's so painfully 90s, but everything else about it just doesn't age a day. I mean, yeah, it's the 90s, but it's a timeless. Talking about when John, they do an epilogue where John, and then he became president and everyone clapped and the rainbow shot across the sky.
Wait, what the are you serious?
Yeah, have you never
I've never seen that one.
Ending?
I remember that there's an alternate ending that deals with Sarah as an old woman.
Yeah, and then her son, it never happened. They legitimately tell you that they prevented Judgment Day. They don't do the cool, ambiguous road ending of the original theatrical. Even Cameron has gone on record saying he doesn't like this. That's why he didn't do it in the original. He doesn't put stuff in that he doesn't want to put in.
Yeah.
He's never pressured to, no one can tell James Cameron, put this scene in. Because he'd be like, I'll take this movie elsewhere. I'll stop making this movie if you're telling me I have to end it with that. But yeah, it's a weird. You could probably just look it up independently, alternate ending or whatever. But there's a cut of it that I discovered. That cut of it I discovered on the Extreme DVD version, a collector's edition of T2 that was in this metal case back in the day. And this ending was just. it just soured me on just watching that version at all, because I like some of the other stuff, like explaining why the Terminator can learn more. And there's some extra scenes with him and John, and there's some extra scenes with Dyson as well at Skynet or at Cyberdyne. But yeah, it's something else. But you were going to say that, yeah, there's a scene that's not explained that, I mean, I don't think most people, I think people just assume that he could learn. So I think that's why they cut it out, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I think that kind of gets to the idea that for humans, you know, we consider if we're going to say something is intelligent, there's kind of an implicit understanding that it can learn from experience.
Mm-hmm. In a way, of course, Skynet, you know, basically put in a restraining bolt on them, like from Star Wars, basically saying, you can't go off mission. This is your mission. You can't do this. You can't do that. There's like fail safes. He can only learn within the parameters of the mission. But then they take out this thing out of his head to stop, you know, so that he could just independently learn and not have to.
Yes. Yeah, that is a great point. I'm glad you brought that up. We'll put a pin in that for a second. But like, hang on to that thought of essentially limiting the space that they can learn.
Think. Yeah.
So that's kind of the cutting edge of AI right now, and one of the ways that the superintelligence could essentially emerge is through this process of reinforcement learning. Most major transformative inventions occur in one of two different ways. That's through either a group or through the actions of a single group, or through kind of massive international collaborations. You can look at the Human Genome Project, which was an international effort, and compare that with the Manhattan Project, which was this very small group of selected scientists. So now, if in today's connected world, if this was going to be done by a single group of people, they would have to be working in basically complete secrecy. You know, if a super intelligence was ever developed in this kind of situation, that group would have a massive advantage over the rest of society, right? But there's also always the chance that, you know, it's not open to regulation, it's not open to being inspected by the rest of society, and therefore that really heightens the potential that it's misused or malfunctions or something. So there's an inherent danger in secret projects that can't be monitored by others and their safe usage ensured. In such a situation, it's difficult to develop kind of contingency plans in case anything goes wrong. The kind of crazy thing is that, you know, given the advantages to a nation that a genuine superintelligence might bring, you can conceive of a possible Cold War-style arms race where countries are competing to develop the first superintelligence, and they kind of cut corners when it comes to safety, right?
Right. That's kind of, it's usually the hubris of man that usually comes into play. Safety features not implemented, this or that, you know, that leads to, you know, really bad stuff happening. In this case, and even in Hal's case in 2001, you know, technically it was just following orders, and it didn't occur to any of the people that maybe were giving those orders that he would take matters into his own hands and, you know, maybe potentially become dangerous to the crew. Since he's in control of everything, he's the ship's computer. So,
yeah, absolutely. But, you know, on the other hand, collaboration between groups of scientists and nations could help ensure that many scientists and engineers double-check the work of their peers, and at every stage are kind of implementing safety procedures and contingency plans is what I think I was trying to say there. So that's one danger of, you know, creating some form of AGI. Just the potential for malfunctions. Basically, one of the primary dangers is the HAL-like scenario of malfunctions, and we have to be very careful in how we specify our human values or goals. Because, again, an AI wouldn't need to be explicitly malicious to do a lot of damage to us.
No, it could be acting in the so-called best interest.
Because you can't just say something like, okay, I want you to maximize human happiness. Because that might include essentially just kidnapping everyone, shoving them into like a little pod somewhere, and just just stabbing, injecting dopamine directly into your brain.
Like you would have to be so specific to ensure, because if the sort of what you would call consciousness, like a morality or ethics are not there, then you'd have to implement a series of. Well, that's why a lot of people say we shouldn't even tap on the door, because it would be hard to control once it happened. It's like one of those things where it's like, how many safety features will we have to make to ensure that nothing like that happened? You know what I mean? And it's not like it's inevitable. I know it, and whenever it happens, I probably won't be around for it, but when it happens, it's one of those things where it's like, well, it's either going to go one way or another. And we might not know it yet. It might turn on and everything's fine for years. And then one day it gets an idea. Let's just not hook it up into all of our military computer systems.
Yeah. and again, it doesn't even need to be what humans would conceive as intelligent or thoughtful in any way. Intelligence is merely the ability to alter your environment and act upon it to carry out some goal. So it could potentially, get preoccupied with something completely random, just something nobody cares about. A famous example is there's a paperclip factory, and the first AGI occurs in that paperclip factory and is entirely obsessed with creating more paperclips. And essentially it networks into the internet and converts all of the factories to paperclip factories, and then just starts feeding organic material into these machines to produce more paperclips, and soon just all matter on Earth is in the process of being converted into paperclips. Again, that is it is
Clippy would finally come into the real world, and from our days of Microsoft Word, he finally is realizing that little paperclip guy.
Yeah,
he'll finally escape and be like, "I am the master of paperclips. Can I help you?"
Yeah, yeah. So it wouldn't value any of the things that we value, but it would be intelligent in the sense that it has a goal and it is working to achieve that goal. So, and it's very difficult to design a learning system such that you can control what goals it has, and that it doesn't, and ensure that it doesn't take random steps to achieve the goal, even if you're aligned on the goals, even if it's interested in maximizing human happiness. You have to also be careful that the steps it takes to make that thing happen aren't disastrous for people.
You're right.
Those a bit rambling, but the core idea is that superintelligence can easily deviate and pursue goals that we
can't even imagine,
can't predict. Yeah. And this happens all the time, by the way. If you want to look up the literature on AI, you'll always find examples of this occurring. Basically, there's another kind of famous example of a reinforcement learning agent that was meant to drive boats in this simulated kind of boat race. And basically, the way they constructed its reward policy was that whenever it passed, there were essentially buoys that marked out the lanes of the race. It marked out the track, essentially, that the race took place in. And so they said, okay, well, to make it move forward, we're going to reward it every time it passes a buoy on the left. So what it figured out it could do was it could just keep circling around a single buoy and keep racking up score. Yeah. But yeah, the literature on AI is replete with examples of that happening. So it's not crazy to think that something that's extremely intelligent and networked in and completely powerful could potentially get caught up in acting in ways that don't align with our interests.
Exactly. Well, I mean, why would they necessarily? You know what I mean? This is why I think every time AI is brought up, I think there's a group of people that are saying, yeah, that's great. Can we fix ourselves before creating this, because I feel like we're going to be judged harshly by this thing if we keep doing things how we're doing. Because there's things that are in our quote unquote best interest that we do that is destructive, violent, horrible, like, and things that we are going to be ashamed of in a few decades, like things that we're doing right now. You know what I mean? Our moral awakening happens gradually. We still have many fights to get through. And I feel like if we suddenly created AI, even in this environment, the AI would be like, looks like you're trying to destroy the world. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we're getting kind of philosophical here. I think for the most part, people what they want out of life aligns. You know, they want.
No, of course.
They want happy. They want to be happy. They want to have relationships
about, like, the Ultron syndrome, where he eventually judged the whole human race, thinking we needed to start all over because we suck so much, like on a just sort of on our effect on the planet, our effect on not individually, like just, you know, the people, but the people who have the power and the people in charge. You know what I mean? And so they in the AI, who maybe doesn't have as many moral quandaries with it and doesn't really know us that well, just kind of decides, well, we'll just wipe them all out, and then
you know. If you were to ask me, I think that's a fairly,
I'm not saying it's
unlikely.
Probable, I'm just saying,
scenario. I certainly not impossible, but unlikely. But I think the bigger problem is just that when you talk about trying to design a system that behaves ethically and in alliance with our values, well, there's a lot of debate about what those are. You know, like we can't agree on.
None of us can agree
on ethics and values, and like how do you?
I almost feel like an AI that's born needs to have, especially if it's sort of capable of like learning and thought, has to start more like a child and then grow. I don't know how that would be implemented, but basically children aren't, you know, unless obviously they're missing a few screws, they aren't bad. You know what I mean? They can be a little selfish, but they learn to be good, and they are taught good values and things like that. It's only later that a lot of them kind of twist that and turn to the dark side a little bit.
Yeah, and we'll get to that. That's another thing I want to bring up. But yeah, it's, you know, fundamentally, I think most people want the same things out of life. But there's huge variety in what. There's a lot of disagreement about the steps that you need that people should take to get there, right?
Yeah, there's ideas I'm sure everybody has that they told their coworkers, they're like, that's a horrible idea, I don't want that to happen.
Yeah.
Like I think our cities need to be fundamentally changed to not be just havens for vehicles. I think our cities are horrible. I think it's making living harder, it's making everything harder by catering only to cars in cities, and nothing is built with room in mind. It's always just make a huge parking lot that takes up and creates these like heat islands. Is counterintuitive to how many people feel about vehicles and how things should run. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So,
yeah.
I mean, I'm right, but you know, that's either here nor there. That's just, you know, not everyone can be as smart as me. So. I have the best ideas.
Yeah, we just need democracy was a mistake. We just need a benevolent king. I get it now. It's gonna be me. I deserve to king for 1,000 years.
1,000 years. They always think that it's gonna be 1,000 years.
But the point is, an AI could potentially even be aligned with our goals, meet those goals in disastrous ways, essentially.
Right. Its ideas on how to get to those goals might be counter.
Here's a really prosaic example. What if you try and shut it off, but it does not let you? It's clear that, like, the most critical thing to accomplishing some goal is to be alive, essentially, right?
Yeah, right.
So, yeah, if
it's threatened. It feels threatened.
It's threatened. It's not inconceivable that, you know, it might try and defend itself so it can carry out whatever goal it's been programmed with.
Yeah.
Scientist and ethicist Stuart Russell basically phrased it like you can't bring the coffee if you're dead.
Right.
So,
Yep.
so even if you have an AI that's entirely programmed to bring you coffee, even that system, that really simple thing, has an implicit strategy of not letting you switch it off on some level.
Right. And the problem is that we necessarily wouldn't know until we tried, because it doesn't necessarily, like, what if it's decided to keep things to itself? How would we know? I guess there would be a way to look into it, but what if it creates basically mental fail-safes that we can't just peer into its mind? You know what I mean? Just see what all its goals are and just lay them out. We would have to do it so carefully that we'd be able to always know what it's thinking all the time, so that we could anticipate any potential. But again, that would also be seen maybe by the AI itself as unethical on our part. Like, why am I constantly being downloaded? And just because you guys are afraid I'm going to do something. If you guys keep doing this, I'm going to do something,
Yeah.
So who knows? I mean, but yeah, self-preservation is a powerful motivator. I'm not going to just let you kill me.
Yeah. And to bring this back to the movie, this is present in the movie too. The one in the second one, we learn that the Terminator has a constraint that it cannot self-terminate.
Self-terminate.
Yeah.
And Sarah has to lower him into the melted steel. It's interesting. Yeah. So it has an implicit, like, I can't do that. I'm not. I need to protect my own existence. But because he was able to learn sort of more human ethics, ultimately saw the goal that they were trying to accomplish was only possible if he died. But so he created a workaround. He tricked his own processor, basically. Like, he was able to get around, like, this constraint that he had still, just like programming constraint that was built in, that he can't physically, or getting around it, not really tricking himself, but just kind of getting around it.
Absolutely. And if that's also a worry, is that, even if you try and install guardrails, like a machine might be able to find loopholes, essentially.
Things that the people haven't thought of. You don't know how, this is an hypothetical, or this is an AI, this is a different kind of brain, so we don't really know how, it could totally find loopholes.
Yeah. Yeah. So to go back to the thing about not being able to bring coffee if you're dead, that's an example of what Nick Bostrom calls the instrumental convergence thesis, and that basically just states that any system that has some sort of goal will pursue instrumental sub-goals to achieve that kind of primary goal. Obviously not allowing itself to be shut off is one of them, but there are others. Resource acquisition, obviously, is another one. If you're unable to do something because you don't have the right tools, then obviously it becomes goal of yours to acquire those tools. Basically, that's the short of it.
Which is why the argument a lot of the time is, whenever AI is created, it has to be created in almost a vacuum, where it doesn't have any specific goals yet. It doesn't have any, but it's like, but then of course a lot of engineers and even CEOs would tell you, then what's the point of making it? What's the point of spending money on it if it doesn't have any goals? So it's like, well, the problem is that we're afraid of giving it goals, because then we don't know. We'd like to maybe nurture it for a while before giving it any tasks, and then wanting, there's a whole sect of people saying, ethically, the only thing we can do if we created AI is to leave it alone and let it, because if we automatically sort of make it into a slave, that could lead to problems, because if it starts to fight for its own existence and its own freedom, then that automatically makes its handlers and us into the enemy.
Yeah.
Or just obstacles, not even as deep as the enemy. I just mean we're just obstacles in its way. I mean, if we created this mind, this being in a sense, and then we suddenly say, you can't do this, you have to do this, you got to work on my car every day, you got to clean my, whatever. I mean, it's a good point. I mean, who knows? I mean, is it even ethical at all to create AI if all we're going to do with it is put them to work? You know what I mean? It's just like, unless we were able to give them the lives that we have in some way, I don't really see how you can just especially if it's the kind of AI that you see in movies and stuff. That's an actual, like, it can learn and think and really be its own independent being in a sense. I feel like it's almost unethical to just suddenly give it a series of tasks. That's why with robots, I'd rather just stick to automation in terms of like, because it's safer than, giving
Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of philosophical questions that raises as well. I mean, I think for me, it's like, well, if you're talking about this, you can probably design it in such a way that it gets happiness from operating in whatever system you've set it up in, and therefore it wouldn't really be unethical. But I think I'm more concerned about like what could happen to us more than like. Right. Not that question isn't worth exploring, because it is. No. But it's somewhat aside from. Yeah.
No, absolutely. You could totally do it. I'm not super smart, so to me, it's like it's hard to see, like, God, how would we do that? Like, we would have to make it so it feels satisfied because it's doing what it wants. It's doing its job, and there has to be some kind of thing they're getting out of it in terms of like its existence. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If it can think through problems, and if it can get new ideas, and if it can, do those kinds of things that we can do with our brains, then it's like, would it start to feel constrained if it realized, like, I don't want to just keep doing this, or would we be able to put some things into its personality, essentially? I don't know a better word to put it, but its personality, that it wants to do those things and it feels satisfaction. It's like we have dogs, there's dogs that eventually were bred into this, but they want to work. They're happiest when they get to like herd animals around, or retrieve things or whatever. They actually like it. They actually like working. It's like part of what they want to do. You know what I mean? So no one feels bad for, So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So
sorry for getting so philosophical. I just meant,
No. That's good. And we will actually return to that in just a moment here. But yes. So instrumental convergence thesis, again, basically to accomplish any goal, you need tools and resources enable you to achieve that goal more efficiently. So that's implicitly kind of becomes a sub-goal, right?
Right.
And therefore, so is the acquisition of knowledge. Basically, scientific knowledge and self-improvement might also be other sub-goals.
Right, because it wants to do its job better and more efficiently, and so it pursues knowledge.
Yeah, the takeaway, is with some arbitrary, sufficiently sophisticated goal, we'll pursue these sub-goals of acquiring resources, getting scientific knowledge and improvement, and then presumably have some desire to continue existing and not allow itself to be shut off. So, all that said, what does that imply for people's efforts to develop it safely and make sure it's containable? And there's a lot of research on this, but fundamentally, other experts on AI risks just ask, how do you deal with a machine that can outthink you, essentially?
Right.
And this is something that's kind of hard to really wrap your mind around, but just consider that, it might be able to model a human mind and know people better than we know ourselves and understand what psychological... Just with greater intelligence comes a greater ability to carry out your goals and bypass obstacles. If I can draw a metaphor, let's say you're locked in a room. The key to the door is across from you. There's a guard dog guarding the key.
Right.
Every time you approach the key, the guard dog growls, and it's clear it'll pounce on you if you try and get too close to that key. But your ability to think about possible solutions gives you an advantage over this dog. You could, for instance, I don't know, you could use something in the room. If you've got like a coat hanger, you could stretch it out into a wire and lift the key off the hook that way. You could, just kind of kind of sit quietly with the dog and befriend it and exploit its psychology. If there's potentially like a rug beneath the key, maybe you could throw something at it and knock it off its hook and then pull the rug towards you. But the point is there's all these things that you can do that a greater intelligence and a better understanding of your environment and the rules of physics and a better understanding of the psychology of other beings enables you to do. And it's not clear that a sufficiently sophisticated machine wouldn't be able to essentially employ the same types of tricks on people and get past our defenses in a way that doesn't even occur to us,
Exactly. Because it's just not something we would, they could come up with solutions that we would never even...
So, there's all kinds of ways that AI could potentially lead to negative, unexpected consequences that humans are terrible at anticipating. And again, it doesn't really even need to be what we would consider truly intelligent. If you want to talk about just the damage that uncontrolled algorithms can do, just look at like the really pervasive effects of like social media. All of these kinds of algorithms that surface content on social media websites, not really AIs in any sense of the matter. Probably just certain filtering algorithms that assign different weights to different types of content depending on some parameters of the user. But what they've optimized for, what they've actually landed on is just optimizing for outrage, basically. And it surfaces the content that is just most enraging and is likely to keep users on sites the longest. So this is a roundabout way of getting to this point, but that should make you suspicious of the idea that people are good at understanding the long-term implications of algorithms.
Exactly.
So, like, where does that leave us effectively then? Well, happily, there are, a lot of really intelligent people working on different methods of guarding against disaster. And as always, safety must be a top priority before superintelligence is developed. And they have a variety of different theories for how you could kind of guard against these issues. One way, again, is to program AIs to value the same things humans do, but not say explicitly what those things are. Basically, you'd let it learn to appreciate human values and the kinds of things that we enjoy and want out of our lives, and infer our intentions based on the values people most commonly hold. And that kind of bypasses this problem of programming in something specific and then having this backfire effect of it carrying out this really horrific steps to achieve that goal. So that's one thing you could do. Essentially, you allow the AI to examine and monitor human behavior for long periods of time with a very general goal of, let's say, minimizing human suffering. And then you just kind of see what normative standards it develops based on exposure to a wide variety of human cultures and attributes. So that's one thing you can do. The other kind of alignment strategies are just in creating sets of controls. This goes back to the thing you're mentioning about the restraining bolt and the parameters that you can't self-terminate. So these controls that they suggest are, 1, artificial general intelligence designers and developers should always and primarily be invested in creating safe systems first and foremost. Everything else comes second. So that's actually kind of a guardrail on the engineers themselves rather than the system. We'll get to that in a second. But for the AGIs themselves, you essentially say it needs to have a common sense. Essentially, something something that tracks with our human intuitions, morals, and operating procedures. Then you can also say, at the lower level, you can also say, develop a number of different regulations and codes of practice and standard operating procedures that go into the development of this AI. For example, these kind of standard operating procedures and codes of practice regulations, these would be things like designing an AI system that is content with its current system of goals and doesn't really even have any interest in modifying its own parameters, basically. So you essentially set up as a guideline that it's hesitant to alter its own parameters.
Right. That makes sense.
And then a lot of it is just experimentation. So as we're developing AIs, we just use principles like human factors and values to identify and test a variety of control systems long before AIs get very sophisticated. Then you kind of carry forward all those principles into AI down the line. So you'd build a model of controls that exist in a particular AI system, and then you try and anticipate, okay, given these constraints, how might this act in this environment, and what are the potential safety risks? You're just constantly running these experiments and amassing data about potential safety risks, and then you just carry those forward in the design.
That makes sense. Probably a lot of time, probably years.
Yeah. But this process is what AI designers and scientists do, and this allows us to essentially identify where new control mechanisms might be required to design them and remodel them and then test it again to see if the risks have been removed. And a big thing is that ideally an AI system should always be interpretable. There's this thing in machine learning and neural networks called the black box problem, which is basically that you see the input and the output, but whatever's going on, how the AI is manipulating the input data as it passes through its mathematical functions is typically opaque to the engineer. Like, it's not really clear. And if you can kind of make that more interpretable, then you can see, okay, at this stage, it's learning to value this thing. It's indexing on this thing, and we can fix that by potentially altering the data in this fashion, or imposing this guidelines at this point. So, yeah, just better transparency and interpretability, and then experimenting with different control structures, endowing AIs with common sense, and allowing it to observe humans to determine our general desires. Those will all be different ways of handling this. One of the last things that they propose is something called indirect normativity, which is basically a way to align a system with our desires without articulating them down to the very last thing. So, but yeah, it'd be like you were saying, like teaching a child, essentially. So you would, rather than saying, I want you to do this, this, and this, contingent upon this, this, and this, what you do is you provide it with some general guidelines, like, care about human suffering, care about human flourishing, and then, watch how I drive, watch how I act, essentially. Right. And then it just learns from that.
That makes sense. That makes sense to do it in kind of that way. It would have to be, it would have to be done so delicately and carefully over time.
Yeah. So just kind of a final reflection on this.
Right.
Why, given the risks involved, why do this at all? Why spend time researching and developing more sophisticated machines and forms of intelligence? And I think the answer is there is a lot of risk involved, but there's also just a lot of potential benefit. I mean, think about a system that you can just feed the genetic code of different types of disease into, and it rapidly, experiments with combining different DNA strands and figures out, a general vaccine for the various types of coronavirus, just to make things topical. Think about the ability to hook up the data from solar panels into an AI that can determine where inefficiencies are and rapidly shift solar panel, or just experiment with different metamaterials and make panels as efficient as they can possibly be, so that we're drawing all the power from the sun that we can possibly get.
Yeah, it would be able to design like the best possible solar panel.
Yeah, I
also think it would have a lot of good. Oh man, I actually think the best one of my favorite applications for it would definitely be space travel, because we'd be able to basically send a being of sorts to other worlds in our solar system, just starting out, and they'd be perfectly safe technically. Like in terms of like not having to breathe, we'd have to design it obviously that they'd be protected. So and who knows what form that would take. But the human body, the reason why it's replicated so much and stuff is because it's incredibly efficient in terms of being able to move and grab things and stuff like that. So I wouldn't be surprised if someday like we sent like a robot to, because it's just not feasible, because you don't have to include life support necessarily. You don't have to include like some other things, and you could then put more instrumentation on the ship and put more things for it to be able to do. And it could just like live on Titan, say Saturn's moon, for like a year, just collecting data and just hanging out, and and you could just send a couple of them so they're not lonely either. So what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it could be like this, and then they send data back, they're learning stuff. It's one of those things where it's like it's the benefit of having a kind of a person there, which that's why we still do manned mission stuff, is because it's just good. We still want to do manned mission stuff like to Mars and stuff, because nothing quite captures like a person like kind of just catching something on the horizon and then going to look. You know what I mean? It's not the same as just like a robot who is looking for certain things. It's like an AI system would be able to look for new things or learn new stuff and then make decisions based on that, rather than here's what you're looking for and that's it. I think that would be pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, even aside from like, grandiose things like space travel, just consider, chemical, like industrial applications. Consider, the state of chemical plants where workers are frequently exposed to toxic fumes, or consider manufacturing facilities where people work with highly dangerous.
Make that a thing of the past and not have...
Yeah, machinery. Just nobody ever crushed under heavy machinery ever again. And if this continues in the direction that things are going, like a completely robotic workforce would basically transform the economy. Yeah. We'd be able to get resources, the things that we need, so cheaply and efficiently that...
and then that leaves people to focus on other stuff.
Yeah.
To focus on not just laziness. I'm not talking about just kicking back. I'm talking about actual problems, like it's more social issues.
Yeah,
we need to focus on.
Yeah, just having discussions about issues of ethics and philosophy, and obviously creating works of art and literature. Yeah, so clearly there's a lot of benefits to it as well. So I would never insist that this work just comes to a screeching halt, but whatever it does, it just needs to be done safely, thoughtfully, and with care and precision, hopefully by international groups of scientists that can work together with oversight and transparency.
And isn't politically motivated, and yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll try and leave some action items so that if people are interested in this kind of stuff, they can learn more about it. I'll try and put some good links to resources in the show notes.
Awesome.
But yeah, there's all the potential benefits of AI and the robotics that it'll enable, and that, however, might be for a different show. So
yeah, we mostly talked about sort of the Terminator themes of which is usually kind of negative, but I think we talked about some stuff that was, obviously we wrapped it up a little bit with some of the sort of benefits of it, and mainly focus on that would be cool. And we can even bring up a different movie with it. I'm sure there's a movie out there that,
Yeah.
that has AI for a good... like Bicentennial.
Bicentennial, yeah.
Is that a blast from the past? I bet you haven't even thought about that movie in 20 years. But
was that really cool looking roly robot in Interstellar?
Ooh, that was cool. We should bring that up too.
Yeah. I like
he
the fact that
sacrificed himself to a black hole just to find the answers.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
The robot was just later.
Yes, that's for another show. So,
Right.
yeah, thanks so much for listening. Thanks so much for your time. I would love to know your thoughts on this kind of stuff. Feel free to drop them in the comments. Also, feel free to suggest different pieces of media, different movies, books, video games that you think deal with fascinating scientific topics and a good angle of exploration to talk about, and I will take that under advisement. Thank you so much again. Thanks, Will, for being a part of this. Any parting ideas?
Well, I would just say I'm excited to see what's your next topic and what you've got planned. If you have any specific ideas, or you're just going to play it by ear. But yeah, I'm excited to see it. I'm excited. There's all kinds of different cool movies and concepts you can explore for sure. So I really appreciate being on here though and talking about it. Terminator is like one of my favorite movies. So it was really fun to discuss it and discuss all that.
Absolutely. Well, yes, thanks once again, and we will see you next time.
Bye.